The Agronomist is brought to you by Real Ag's Machinery Update, Corteva, Enlist D3, and ADAMA Canada. While other sources of innovation run dry and fail to understand your needs, ADAMA is here to deliver. And we're all in on you. Talk to your ADAMA sales rep today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Agronomist. I am your host, Lindsay Smith, and I'm pretty excited for tonight's episode. Also super excited that it's this episode and next week's, and that wraps 2023 for The Agronomist. So the holiday season is rapidly approaching, as is sort of the look back season, as I'm going to call it. So looking forward to next week's show as well. Make sure you get those. Here's one thing I'm going to say. Get your questions in perhaps ahead of time to make sure that we cover what it is you think we should. So next week's theme is going to be sort of a look back at the top agronomic challenges of 2023. So by all means, let me know. Pop me a line. We're going to have likely 3 guests. Haven't secured the third one yet, but likely. We'll have great representation from across Canada and some really great chats. So if you've got any questions that you want to have answered on the show, just let me know ahead of time. All right. Hello to Ray and to Jason out of Manitoba. Ray's in Alberta. And Sean Haney is joining us tonight. I thought he'd be watching football, but there he is. Okay. As a reminder, realagriculture.com/agronomist. That's where you get those CEU credits. Let us know you watched the show. Head on over there tomorrow morning. It'll be posted. You can let us know and get those CEU credits. All right, for those of you who collect those. And without further ado, tonight's topic, we are taking it back to Agritechnica. We are going to bring home the best and the brightest of what happened there, where we see the applications for Western and Eastern Canada. And Warren has joined us. Hello, Farmer Schneck. We haven't seen you in a while. All right, so to talk about Agritechnica, and we've got so many photos and some video clips and the whole bit. We've got Dan Petker of Petker Farms and resident red clover whisperer, I'm told, and Nick Dubuc, ag engineer and farmer out of Quebec. Welcome here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All righty. Okay, so let's get going. All right. Yes, Warren, thank you for joining us. But I'm going to guess you're not done harvest. I got to tell you. And Nick, maybe I'll start there with you. Is all the corn off where you are? Because where I am, it's now all missing its tassels and like the top third of the plant. But there are still a couple fields waiting.
I'd say it's mostly done around my place, luckily, because with the weather we've had, with the amount of sticky snow we've had in the last, 10 days, I think there would be a lot of flat corn on the ground.
Yeah, ours is still standing, but it's missing some. Dan, now you live in a very charmed part of the province. So I'm going to assume that everything is done and wrapped up and everything's been put away perfectly.
I bet you there's about 5% of the corn is left, and most people just finished on Friday. So it's all wash up this week and then holiday.
Yeah. And then holiday. There you go. Okay. So yeah, Nick, we just live in the wrong part of the world, apparently. So there's that. But of course, Jason's joining us from Manitoba. Ray, there's been some wild weather out west as well, so always interesting. And I did see a really interesting tweet I retweeted just earlier today about the lack of snow cover in Saskatchewan, which is never a good thing, certainly when we're going on year over year of drought. And so that is going to play into tonight's conversation because there's more than a few things we're going to tackle tonight. One of which we saw a lot of at Agritechnica, of course, is going to be on the weed management side, and a lot of heavy equipment to solve this problem, but a lot of technology to solve this problem. And so just before we get going, though, I do want to send a big shout out. So our team that went to Agritechnica, producer Jay, who's in the background. You may hear him tonight, maybe. I couldn't get him on film, but you may hear him. There you go. I doubt it. Yeah, he is there. He did go. Sean Haney, of course, Bern Tobin, and Rylan Haney all went to the show. Our coverage sponsored by Corteva AgriScience and by Optimum Gly, a new canola trait from Corteva AgriScience. So thank you to them for sending our team there. Tons of videos on YouTube. But the two of you were also there. And so I'll start with Nick. I'm going to start with you. Both of you have shared some thoughts, either through the radio show or on Real Ag. But Nick, what stood out to you most sort of overall at this show as the most fascinating part of it?
Well, there was definitely a huge focus compared to the previous editions about weed control. I guess, alternatives to pesticides because Europe has that mandate right now. 2030, they need to cut pesticide use by 50%. So they were showing all sorts of weed control equipment. Some of it was basically traveling in the past. I've mentioned it, I think, with Sean a little while ago, but, rotary hose, I still don't get it. I don't get how we're going back 50 years in the past, and there's people spending tens of thousands of euros to display that type of equipment on their booth at the largest farm show in the world. There's some other weed control equipment that's way more advanced, lasers or cameras or thing. There were cameras everywhere, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's some anachronic equipment that was shown there.
Okay, Dan, what about you? What struck you most?
Yeah, seeing 40-foot and 50-foot rotary hose blew my mind. I haven't seen a rotary hoe with fresh paint ever in my life, and it was unreal to see them. And people were excited about them. The row crop kind of cultivation approach, there's some amazing stuff there, like just like little section control on a row crop cultivator or some weird rotary thing, and then the other thing was like Europeans love their tillage like more than some of the people I know in Perth County.
Which is, just for anyone who doesn't know Perth County, it's a lot. They really love it. Now, I want to, though, I feel like I need to come to the defense of the rotary hoe. For one thing, you get to drive it really fast. So that is an important key. And if you're targeting little tiny at the thread stage, little tiny weeds at the thread stage, it's incredibly effective and very quick. But I feel like I don't know that the applications are so much so that we should be seeing it, as Nick said, unveiled, spending thousands upon thousands of euros to display at Agritechnica. Nick, did you ask them, like, hey, is this the best you got? Or what was that conversation like with some of the attendees?
I didn't really have any conversation about those because I was like, well, that's old stuff. So, there's not a whole lot to learn about it. But like Dan said, people seem to be really interested looking at the equipment and trying to see how it would fit in their operations. So I guess there's people that are going to make money with this, but it's a bit surprising for us North Americans, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Absolutely. Okay, so now Dan, this was your first go, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, and did you go with any sort of notion in mind of like, I want to find a piece of equipment I'm going to bring back to the farm, or did you go with a completely, I'm just there to experience this?
Well, my dad and I both went, so that was the goal of just father-son trip. Here's a 77-year-old man who did 25,000 steps a day for 5 days in a row and was ready to go still. And I was like, it was amazing, that part. From the equipment side of things, no, I just wanted to get perspective of their approach to land management and soil management, and look at crazy sprayers. Like that was really the thing. I didn't find a lot that I wanted to bring home, to be honest. Like, there's things where we are light years ahead of what the Europeans are doing, and it's because we have certain herbicides allowed. Even in the hort side of things, I look at their approaches, and we're a lot more modern. And their sprayers are way better than ours. That is for sure. But the focus on the plow, the focus on deep tine rippers, and the focus on high-speed discs there was mind-boggling to me.
Now, both of you did send me images. So at any point, if there's a particular piece of equipment you want to call up, but I will note everyone in the audience, these two guys sent me so many great photos and zero captions. So I have to guess what half of these things are. But one of the other things that I certainly noticed, and Nick, I'll go to you with the ag engineer, and you were on to talk compaction not long ago. Some of the pieces of equipment are massive and not necessarily with a lot of thought to compaction. And so why do you think that is? Did you notice that? Did you have any of those conversations?
Well, I mean, there's one misconception I think a lot of people have with Europe, that's thinking farm equipment is small. There's a lot of smaller farm equipment, but there's some massive one. There's one of the pictures, I think it's the first one I sent you, with that 90 feet wide row crop cultivator for cereals, where you basically, that thing is absolutely massive, so big that it has a driven rear axle just to make sure it stays in line. So there's steering on the machine, there's guidance on each of the row units just to cover as much ground as possible as fast as possible. So they do go with big equipment, but then they need to keep that within 3 meters wide, 10 feet wide
Right.
for road travel. So they will come up with all sorts of ideas and contraptions just to be able to meet that road transport requirement. And like this one, I'd say was probably a little bit undertired when you look at it in terms of spreading that load. A little bit is probably an understatement here. It was way too heavy, I guess, for the type of ground conditions you'd be running that piece of equipment in. On the flip side, one thing I did notice on the compaction front is there were a lot more tire inflation systems that I could remember during the previous editions, and all the big manufacturers were showing solutions. So Fendt was initially the first one to come up with factory installed option. Now you would go on any of the majors kiosks and you would see tractors on display that were fitted with either kind of aftermarket systems that they're pushing or integrated systems. So there's that really big push to new tire technologies, inflation systems. I think every manufacturer had that same tire model from Michelin, the Evo Bib, that is suited for central tire inflation systems. So there was still that push to let's try to manage the heavier equipment and with the better tires. So I thought that was interesting, but there is definitely equipment that's way too big for the amount of rubber they have on the ground.
It is fascinating. So, and Dan, you sort of mentioned the farm to fork policy of where they're there's not only restrictions but major restrictions on, or targets on, how much less total pesticide they can use, those sorts of things. So they've got those restrictions, and then also this 10 foot or 3 meter width restriction.
Yeah, like
these are a lot of strange looking things.
Innovation is coming from being mandated or necessity, right? Like, it's amazing what they've done or what people have come up with to work without pesticides or herbicides specifically. Well, although there was one small booth who had this guy had a laser that would target slugs in lettuce, and it would go down the field. That's kind of cool. Concept only.
That.
Yeah.
We could use that for wheat. That pencils out, right? Yeah.
High value crops there, but it was interesting.
That is. Okay, so Francois Tardif is in the chat, and great question regarding alternative weed control, because this is a lot of what we saw. Was there any consideration of the energy requirements of these pieces of equipment, as well as potential soil health effects? So Dan, I'll start with you, because certainly that discussion of soil and movement is one thing that you noticed right away. Did you have any of these conversations as far as the horsepower required to run some of these things?
Well, so horsepower is horsepower. It's just how do you get the energy to make it? The cool thing about Agritechnica is there's a lot of unveiling of awesome stuff, right? And we went to an unveiling just basically by happenstance, and it was the unveiling of a brand new hydrogen powertrain. And there was about 150, 200 people, and they were clapping like crazy as the curtain came dropping down. So there's an alternative, like low carbon energy source to drive horsepower like crazy. So anyone you talk to about, or that I talk to about carbon release from tillage, or like that sort of the loss of energy or carbon usage, you just get blank stares, because
really,
it's not really part of the conversation at all. Their cover crop use is, again, what I noticed with all these tillage tools, and for the soil health effect balancing, I guess, a lot of these discs and rippers and soil destroyers, to me, all had like seed boxes on them to blow seed behind the tillage pass. And again, mandated by certain areas in Europe. I don't think a lot of it would be willingly done unless they were like, if they didn't. Yeah.
Mm.
So no, nobody talks about soil health.
No. So there you go. We're ahead maybe on the conversation on compaction and on soil health or those the soil health effects, let's put it that way, of some of the things that we do. Nick, go
So
ahead.
one thing I thought was kind of confusing is clearly research and development departments from manufacturers working on powertrains and new energies were clearly not talking to the weed control people, because
Yeah.
to me it really seemed like all the alternatives that they were presenting for weed control, be it a laser, be it tillage, all of that is basically let's burn fuel instead of using chemicals. I
Yeah.
mean, there
Right.
were I didn't feel like there was any thought to, is a trade-off any better? Are you
Mm,
trading off pesticides for something better for the environment? It's not a chemical, but is it really better for the soil? Does it require more tillage? Because I mean, some of those row crop tillage equipment, they need ground that's tilled to absolute death.
Yeah.
You need powder.
right.
And to me, there was a no-till drill in one. I think it was in hall number 12 that was right next to a like a row crop tillage, a row crop cultivator with really fine tines. I'm like, well, you can't have both. It's one or the other, and
Mm,
it gets you thinking what's better. And I'm not sure they're looking at the right direction right now. I think there's just that idea. You need to cut pesticides, but at what cost for everything else? So
mm.
I thought that was interesting because there was a big
That
focus on
philosophical
alternative
discussion
energies.
never happens.
Yeah.
Like
Sorry,
you
Dan, what
couldn't.
was that?
Sorry, Nick. It was like the fact to be able to have that philosophical discussion about which way or the other
Mhm.
just was impossible to have. Like the
Mhm.
mindset isn't there. Where I stayed south of Hanover by about 15, 20 minutes, 80% of the fields were plowed, and probably 75% of those fields had a cover crop on them. And I saw one field of winter wheat, and the rest was just waterlogged dirt.
Mm,
And
yeah.
I don't know,
So
maybe they have phenomenal
A-
drainage. I have no
And,
idea.
a-
well, I mean, it is just like us. It's heading into their winter. Jason just shared, Jason C in the chat,
Yeah,
that he was also at Agritechnica, took the train from Berlin to Hanover and didn't see any fields that were worked, but for the amount of tillage implements out there, but lots of waterlogged fields. Now, Nick, before I forget, I wanted to jump on one of the things you said, and Dan, you mentioned it too. So we've got these sort of external things happening, right? So we've got policy, we've got road restrictions. Jason Dubuc with OMAFRA, I met with him last week. They were on an Eastern tour, a couple of our OMAFRA people, and he gave a presentation because he was also at Agritechnica. So one of the things that he hit on that I thought was really fascinating was, when he spoke with some of the, especially on the sprayer side, the engineers and the people making these do not talk to the people using them. There is no like two-way conversation over what do you need, where can we gain efficiency, where can we, like we have with Tom Wolfe and with Jason Deveau, where there's a conversation there about like where could we be, improving. It was very much this feeling that like, here's what we designed, go forth and use it. And there was not that same sort of conversation, and it was, here's the technology we made,
yeah,
there you go. So yeah,
And,
go
and
ahead, Nick.
I wonder if some of that might not be because of how small some of the players are. I mean,
Mm,
you look at sprayers, each and every country in Europe will have their 5 or 10 local manufacturers making equipment that are popular. There's very few manufacturers that will sell everywhere across Europe, across multiple countries. So I would tend to think it's just, well, we've got our local customer base that we really perceive we understand well, but we don't actually talk to them. So there might be a little
mhm.
bit of that versus, having to get out of your comfort zone because you're dealing with different crops, different markets you don't understand, and maybe have to go get more information.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Let's just, producer Jay, if you could, we're gonna. I've got a couple clips that we grabbed from the show. So for anyone who follows along on our YouTube channel on realagriculture.com, you'll know that we have many reports from the show. I think we topped out at almost 70, and so we're a month, as Sean Haney said at the top, we're about a month out from the show. We plan to be through them all within the next probably 8 weeks. So there's a lot coming out, 4 or 5 videos every week, and so I just grabbed a few to to highlight some of what we saw. This first one is on prescription tillage, and so I want to dig in a little bit on what that is. So producer Jay, if you could run our first clip from Agritechnica.
We're looking at a machine here, the top down.
Correct.
Farmers in Canada know it well, but it's changing. Prescription tillage.
Correct.
Tell us how it all comes together.
Yeah, you bet. So the real difference here is that previously on this system, you can adjust each of the sections independently, which you've always been able to do. But now through what we call e-services, which is an isobus system connected to an iPad in the tractor cab, you have the ability to have a prescription map, but for tillage. So instead of a prescription map for seed or fertilizer, where you're changing your rates across the field, you can change your depths across the field with a prescription tillage map.
Talk about this machine, right? The front gang, and we can change it up as we go along this machine.
That's correct. So what makes it unique is we have the discs independently on the front here. So just like a traditional gang disc system, you can do some mixing, you can do some residue management. But then previously or behind it, you have a tine system that's more of a deep tillage system. So for compaction, for ripping up materials, mixing those materials together. And then at the very end, you have a leveling system before it's reconsolidated and packed back into a nice flat surface to seed into.
Right now, a couple of these are in Canada or coming to Canada. When are Canadian farmers going to see it?
Yeah, we've been running some demos in southern Alberta, to be honest with you already. But what is unique about this system is that prescription tillage, the E system, that's brand new. We'll expect to see some of these in Western Canada for spring of 2024.
So how do farmers operate this, right? We're running it off the iPad?
That's correct, yeah. It's an iPad based in the tractor cab, which is unique. You don't have to worry about adjusting your hydraulic valves manually anymore, and you don't have to worry about the donuts for your depth stops back here. It would be all electronic through the cab, through the iPad for adjusting those depths independently.
The Agronomist is brought to you by ADAMA Canada, Machinery Update, and Enlist D3 from Corteva. Looking for high yields and clean fields? Choose Enlist D3 soybeans. Part of the Enlist weed control system, Enlist D3 soybeans help you control tough weeds, providing herbicide choice and tank mix flexibility. Enlist D3 soybeans, the best in beans, period. All right, so prescription tillage. So I see that and I think, okay, smart. We've got an iPad. We're not making new hardware and starting from scratch and saying you must use this hardware. We're going to use existing. But it's tillage. Nick, I'll start with you. Is this a really smart thing? Does this have a lot of applications?
I guess it could be, but I think I have more questions than answers on this. I mean,
Oh.
the big one for me is how do you make the prescription? What do you use to make that prescription? Is it based on yield map? Is it based on soil maps? Do you actually go and map out the depth of compaction? Because for me, the one thing that would make the most sense is having, compaction depth map where you actually try to go as shallow as possible. You only go to the depth of that compaction instead of, if your deepest compaction is 16 inches and go 16 inches all across the field, maybe there are spots you can go shallower, but how do you map that out? I know there's a few technologies there, but I've got questions.
Okay, Dan, same thing.
I fully agree. I'm just like, how do you do it? And I guess where that's targeted is towards more of that European market or specific parts of Ontario, or I know there's tillage zones in Canada and in the US, so it's just cool idea, like really cool, but just how do you develop the maps? Like we have soil that's 4 inches deep, so.
Yeah, so Dan, I mean, you use strip tillage, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that you've instituted on your farm. Did you see anything similar to something like this prescription tillage or whatever that would apply in a strip tillage and that would solve a problem for you in a strip tillage scenario?
No. Like Strip till is just like a row crop cultivator moved to the side.
Yep.
You set it for 2 inches, and you either, if you have like parallel arms on your units, you're going up the hill, the unit stays your depth. And yeah, most fields that for planting, you're just right below the seed trench, and we don't have prescription depth for corn. So I don't know. Like it's neat, but it doesn't wow me.
Okay. I would love, though, now the Vaterstedt unit, we definitely see maybe more in Western Canada. If there are any Westerners in the chat tonight that are like, actually, I want it, and here's why, this is your time to chime in.
Yeah, it'd be cool to.
Because, Dan, to your point, we have different, I mean, yes, when we think of Western Canada, we think reduced tillage, zero till. There's still lots of tillage that happens and lots of different
Yeah.
kinds of tillage that happens.
Yeah.
And so there are still applications, definitely. But yeah, I mean, I think it is neat. And I will say, in a lot of these videos that we've seen coming out of Agritechnica, a lot of the things we saw, some of it is, its own little ecosystem, and other things are like something like this that is going to be an app on your iPad that you probably already have in the cab. Is kind of nice to at least see things talking to each other, which is one of those things. Now, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea could have merit. I can see where, fuel use reduction, for example, if you can actually manage depth, but I'd need to see numbers, because one feeling in general that I get from a lot of things I saw over there is, manufacturers are just trying to capture, whatever they save you, they're trying to capture it and get it in their own pocket by what they're selling you.
Yeah.
So what's actually left for you? Do you ever break even on some of those ideas? That I'd love to see the numbers.
Yeah. Break even, but let alone even make $2.
Right. Yeah. That feels very cynical of both of you, and I love it. Okay, so Sean Haney, who I offered to host tonight, and he said no, but it sounds like he's going to hang out and he's going to ask some questions. So he did ask, what did you think of the CR11? So the CR11, of course, the New Holland Combine, it was unveiled very much in an unveiling. The video, absolutely took off like a rocket Sunday night. A lot of people have talked about this machine. Nick, I'm going to start with you, if only because the one question that kept coming up on YouTube was, how come the tire, like between the tire and the body, there was no clearance? It looked like it. And people were like, if you get into mud, what happens? So, Nick, do you have similar concerns?
Well, say I did not even notice that, and usually tires and tracks would be the first thing I
Yeah,
noticed. But
that's like your jam. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I do know those combines usually have a black fender that probably kind of made it look like the gap was fairly small. So that might be the thing. But that tire, I was actually surprised. Speaking of that tire at the front, to see it like basically what would be the largest combine on the market now on tires, especially in Europe, because I mean, one of the main reasons they buy tracks in Europe is actually for road travel, and Michelin developed a tire specifically for that machine. That would have the load capacity. It's like 8 feet tall, and it's just a massive tire. So that was a bit surprising, to be honest. And I would think of all the majors there, that was probably one of the main attraction, one of the actual new things shown, even though it's a combine. Just the one thing I thought was really cool is how they're basically rethinking the driveline. So again, they have that constraint, can't go any wider than on a combine. It's 3.5 meters, so just short of 12 feet wide on the road. So they completely rethought the driveline, so they could enlarge the frame of the machine within the side panels. So the rotors are now driving everything that's at the front. The positioning of the engine to eliminate all universal joints and things like that. So that's actually, it looked like a combine, but there's some groundbreaking things under the hood. The funny thing is they wouldn't let you close to the combine or see under the hood.
Yeah.
Unless you we tried to go for the unveiling, and it was just too many people, so we went the next day. And they had the side panels open for a private tour, and I run up there and take some pictures, and then
That's what I did too.
Yeah. I was watching you on Twitter, and it's cordoned off by a velvet rope.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
we went to the far side, or I guess the right side of the combine, and I see like guys in Edmonton Oiler hats, and all of a sudden there was a Canadian crew of New Holland customers there getting a private tour of the machine. So I snuck a lot of pictures while those guys were
Good job,
watching
Tim.
it.
You just needed to like steal an Oilers cap, and then you just slide right in.
That's how you
And
leave
then
the
you
North
sneak it.
Americans. They were wearing baseball hats.
Yeah. Yeah. So it did get, I mean, it did, Nick, as you said, it was a major unveiling. It did get a lot of attention. It was definitely something that a lot of people mentioned, was that they didn't really get to see like inside and didn't get to really dig into it. But it does sound like, that'll be to come, I suppose. There were some that did. Neither of you mentioned the header, but a couple people mentioned this. It was a MacDon header on it, which is, I thought, really cool. MacDon, of course, based in Winnipeg, and so kind of neat to see that. But I was also a little surprised on such a big unveiling. So, Nick, what did you think? Did anybody mention or draw attention to the fact that it wasn't a New Holland brand on the front?
Yeah. There were some mentions about the header that I heard, and see, I guess I paid mostly looked at the combine, so I did not actually look at the header. I saw people mention, "Hey, it's a 50-footer." Some other people were saying it's a 60-footer. I thought it was a 50, but I mean, I don't think there were any markings on the header, so it could actually be something bigger than what we're seeing. But yeah, I think, I mean, MacDon is an OEM supplier for CNH, so it's kind of cool that basically, you get to see Canadian-made products everywhere in the world now. And Draper heads are really making big inroads in Europe, especially with the bigger combines now. So, although I have no idea how they would transport that header on the road, because I think it's actually longer than the legal limit. Even if you transport it lengthwise, I think it's too long. Yeah.
So Jason Vogt, who's at Manitoba, he said he saw it tested in the field this fall. It's a 61-foot header, he says.
Okay.
And so he saw it in real life. In the Red River Valley, we don't worry so much about the width problems. There's no trees to hit along the road. But it definitely, it's a very large header. I just worry about the weight of it, for one thing. Dan, go ahead.
No, it was monstrous and beautiful head. The combine was gorgeous, and like we bleed a lot of green on this farm, and even my dad at 77 was like, "That is a stunning piece of equipment."
Yeah.
So interesting.
If it's going to be, it's going to be amazing. What's that?
Interesting bit of information. They actually painted the combine gold after they found out that they had won a gold medal. So it was supposed to be painted the actual New Holland yellow. I spoke to a product manager there. He was saying we had it painted just because we won a gold medal.
That looks way better.
I was going to say, is it going to be available in the color? We should let them know. Now, Jason, who saw it work as well, the header, and said the combine needs to be on tracks for sure. And Sean mentions he thought people were too harsh on the color. He thought the gold was quite lovely, but people were hating on it. So there you go. But hey, if you're not allowed to see the gut of it, you got to talk about something. So there you go.
It probably looked better in person than on pictures, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No,
everyone
I would.
Around said it looked beautiful. Like it was beautiful.
Yeah. And so I will say there have been now some, at least graphics showing, Nick, as you mentioned, sort of looking at it from the head on and watching, how product flows through it. So they are starting to sort of open that up, but I guess it was just for the unveiling. They made it quite sneaky.
The one thing that I thought was real interesting with that combine was actually the combine that wasn't there at the sister company. So how basically they introduced that combine, and the red guys only had, I guess, their current lineup with plus 10. They just come up with change a digit, and it's a new combine. And how they actually had to put out a press release on the Monday, I thought was like, okay, there's something going on. There's marketing people that didn't speak to each other.
You may have pointed something out. I feel like that maybe happens. Okay, all right. So, I mean, that was definitely one of the big unveilings. The tillage side, a huge thing, and yes, on the weed control side. So we'll bring it back to maybe some of the more promising and really neat things. So, Dan, you did mention zapping slugs, which I would love to see happen. But when it comes to weed control in general, I mean, we've seen some of the interrow cultivation, we've seen some of the some of the cameras and technology. Dan, what stood out for you as some of the better ideas on the weed control side?
Like Bayer was promoting their Magic Scout and Magic Sprayer. So there's this drone that flies out in your field, scans it out, finds your weeds. Then you send out another one to spot spray and kill those weeds. That was really cool. There was
That would be
a
cool.
whole bunch of those automated, very point specific sprayer type things. It was awesome. Like that part. Like you wonder though how cost effective it has to be before you can scale it up right into, let's say, North American production, or even like Eastern Europe where the fields are monstrous.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Although,
really
I
neat.
mean, we often see some of this technology, it gets developed for the high value crops, and then we figure out how to make it, cheaper or that will work on broad acre basis so that it opens up the market, right? So Nick, for you, what did you see on the spray side or on the
So
weed control side?
one thing that actually got me excited that wasn't the actual spraying, but I've mentioned it to a few people already, but that, universal lid idea that they're working for pesticide containers. Somehow I got really excited about this, where
Oh.
there's a bunch of pesticide manufacturers working together to come up with a standard. And I know I got when I posted that on Twitter, not everybody agreed with me, so I'm sure there's going to be comments tonight. But for I guess smaller operations like Eastern Canada, what we have, or what I expect to see in Europe quite a bit, where you still deal with 10-liter jugs or things like that. They actually designed something to minimize exposure. Any sort of You're basically never exposed to the pesticide. There's rinsing, and they've not only developed the lid itself but the equipment to empty it, to meter it, so you can do really accurate metering of the product. And all of I mean, I hate to say this, but I feel like this is one example of the regulatory environment actually driving innovation. Whether it makes sense for everybody or not, that's a different question. But for some people, I think it could actually make sense, both in terms of safety and also in terms of, I guess, accuracy, how you meter your product and things like that. So I thought that was really interesting. I think that's coming to market. I've seen a few other companies that were showing spraying equipment that had those meters on the equipment to use with those lids. So
So
that was neat.
Sean has furiously messaged me to say our video on that is coming out next week.
Okay.
So they also found it super cool. So there you go.
Yeah.
But Nick, I think it's a really key point of, yes, okay, some regulation might drive innovation maybe for a specific purpose and maybe not necessarily the most well thought out in some things, like the idea of having to use a whole bunch of diesel to try and get rid of weeds instead of spraying. But that doesn't mean that we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? I mean, there can be some very good things, and just like we've had some innovation on a continuous rinsing and these sorts of things that can decrease the environmental exposure or the human exposure to anything, then why not, right? Like these are good things to do for our industry for sure.
Especially if you get the innovation.
Awesome.
Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, Nick. But just like to reiterate on that closed transfer part, from the farmer perspective, they let me play with it for a bit, like the BAS, the Bayer booth there, Nick, and of course I had Jason Dubuc letting me, and it seems quite it's intuitive, it's easy. If we all have to upgrade our sprayers to them, there better be some funding to help us. But I won't fight it if it's coming, because it was just, you can dump, rinse, like on the one, you could dump and rinse and be done in a minute and a half,
Mm,
and it all just
okay.
poof back into your sprayer.
And away you go.
Yeah,
Agrotop. That's the name.
yeah.
Agrotop.
There was 3 or 4 different companies promoting these
With
things.
similar. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Jason says, and this is now again, if we've got photos, because we do actually have a lot, and I realize we haven't been showing them. We might just have to cycle through like everybody go get your popcorn and we'll do like a quick go through. But Jason says so he got to see the horse sprayer fall 2019, and they seem to be moving towards bigger tank versus wider booms. And this actually, I do think we have a picture of one of these. What did Nick and Dan see from the European manufacturers? I do think we have a picture. Now I have to remember. Do either of you have that one that it's like just gigantic as far as
Oh
the
yeah,
tank?
the Dumont.
Yeah, it's in Dan's.
The green and yellow.
Green and yellow, I think. Okay, so it's in
Yeah,
Dan's.
that
Producer
thing.
Jay, that one.
So that's 20,000 liters of water in there on a 138-foot boom. So
20.
you're
I'm sorry,
talking
how much?
20 ton product.
My manure
And,
tanker is smaller than this.
There are manure tankers
Look.
smaller than this.
Like it's great, but that thing, so that company right there, like Daman, how do you say it, Nick?
Yeah.
Is it Daman or Daman? I don't know.
Daman.
Daman.
I believe.
Yeah, so that is considered, that company right there is probably considered one of the leader sprayer manufacturers in Europe.
Okay.
Like people all kind of see what they do and then try to mimic and follow. Maybe not
Okay.
big sprayers like that, but like their nozzle tech or their
Okay.
plumbing
Yep.
and all this kind of stuff. And that thing was monstrous. Like just unreal.
Okay,
I
so
did take a close up of what the tires were, but I can't remember the sizes.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
one
so
thing,
Nick, are those enough tires? Because I feel like when that thing is full, holy smokes!
Steerable axles on that too.
Yeah,
There's
there's
what? Sorry?
steerable.
Okay, they are.
Steerable axles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I guess you could probably live with wider tires than this, but then you're going to be driving down tram lines, or I mean, I've seen a video of that sprayer running down potato rows, so you're probably limited in how wide you can go. Although I would tend to say that might actually be better than some self-propelled we have in North America. So I'll just throw this out there. One thing that's really interesting, going back to Jason's comment, going to bigger tanks versus wider booms. I don't think we've seen any super wide booms much above 120, 130.
Yeah.
Other than that fertilizer spreader from Horsch. But I think, for the most part, they're starting to be limited by, field sizes. Unless you go to like the eastern part of Germany or Eastern Europe, you still have not always very big fields, even though you have some big farming operations. So I think they're compensating with bigger tanks because they also spray much slower than we do. I mean, a lot of those self-propelled sprayers would never have. They're much lighter than us, even though they have similar tank capacity, but they don't drive nearly as fast. So,
and a comment on that too was they spray much higher water volumes than we do in Eastern Canada, let alone the West. I'm talking to one grower about spraying corn fungicides, and they are dropping like 50 US gallons per acre. Like we cap out at 20 and think that's a lot. They're doubling us and tripling us in some cases. Like it's just volume is king.
Wow.
Sean brings up the Stara sprayer, and that was probably the coolest sprayer. And that thing, the booms were mount and pivot mid-body of the sprayer unit. That thing was awesome. And Jason Dubuc has pictures of it, I'm sure.
Yes, I think he does. Yeah.
I'd say that Stara sprayer is a good example of the things you can see at that show where, Stara is a Brazilian company. They do sell in Eastern Europe, but just seeing that manufacturers go there and they still try to cater for people that are not necessarily the local German farmers is interesting. I mean, Agco had a Fendt Gator on their booth from Jackson, Minnesota, from the North American factory. That is not sold in Europe, and they still brought it there. Just to attract attention and actually, get even people from abroad to have a look at them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, and so there will be more coverage of that. Producer Jay, I do want to, with the time we have left, I want to go to the clip on the smart implements because I do want to talk about this aspect as well, and then I want to cycle through some of your pictures because there are some really cool ones as well. But Producer Jay, if you would, our clip on smart implements.
Okay, so we're seeing some shots of the product as we're talking here. Tell us exactly what this unit does, and some of your autonomy platform.
Yeah, so this is basically a normal tractor which is allowed to drive completely autonomously. In the back and in the front you have a 3-point linkage, so you can use your normal implements you have at home. And you are allowed to leave it on the field unsupervised, it's doing its job. That you are allowed to do that, you have to do the pre-planning inside the portal, then you send the task to the machine, bring the machine to the field, and then you can let it drive autonomously. But one problem we are facing is that when the tractor is driving autonomously and the implement has a problem, the autonomous tractor is continuously driving. So now we are working with implement manufacturers together that they are supervising their implements, that the implements sends a message to the robot, that the robots now there's a problem, and that they, in the first incident, that they will stop, and then in the next steps, that they are able to work on the process, that they are reducing the failure, and the failure is gone.
Yeah, so your autonomy platform, you're working with other manufacturers. You have some partnerships in the market. Talk about that.
Exactly. So we founded an open partnership with Amazon and Class together. This partnership is called 3A, and we even got an Agritechnica silver medal for that. So it's a really awesome big thing. And with this partnership, we are heading to the aim that we standardize the interfaces between implements and tractors. That we are able to work with different implements, and that we will always supervise the process, and that also the implement manufacturers are able to work with different kinds of tractor manufacturers.
So not only is the power unit, the tractor, not only is it smart, but so is the implement.
Yes. So for now, most implements are not smart right now, but with this open partnership, we are trying to push all the implement manufacturers that they start to do or to make their implement smart, because then we can drive the whole process autonomously.
So from your business standpoint, is Exceed, are you manufacturing units like this as well as doing software partnerships with some of the manufacturers?
Yes. So we are basically a startup from the Netherlands, which was founded 5 years ago, and our first products are like here, the Exceed Eggbot, and it is an autonomous tractor, and we are really selling the machines. We started to sell them 1.5 years ago. We have 3 different kinds: a 4-wheeler, a 3-wheeler, and a track version. And we are really producing them, and now that farmers get more advantages of it, we make the software cooperation with implement manufacturers to make our product more usable.
Diesel powered, but there is electrical output on it as well.
Once more?
There is electric on it as well, but it is diesel powered.
Yes. So for now it has a diesel motor, a diesel Deutz motor, so quite good quality. And behind the Deutz engine, there's always everything is electrical. That we have the flexibility to make everything electrical.
The Agronomist is brought to you by ADAMA Canada, Enlist E3 from Corteva, and The Sharp Edge. The Sharp Edge is a video series where we look to farmers, agronomists, and researchers to give us the sharp edge on everything from agronomic problem solving to increasing profitability and improving sustainability. The Sharp Edge is made possible by support from Mazak Seeds. Find the videos on our YouTube channel. All right, so I just want to say, yes, Sean, very trendy vest. But more importantly, could you imagine doing an interview in like your second or third language? Oh my gosh, this is just amazing to me. Nick, you do it all the time. But anyway, I do love her. One more time, like Sean, you got to speak slower. Okay, so Dan, I'll start with you. I know that you were touring around with Jason Dubuc. I know he was interested in that piece of equipment as well in this discussion because there is a sprayer there as well.
Yep.
What did you think of this idea of, okay, if we have autonomous tractors, what if something goes wrong with the implement? They got to talk to each other.
Well,
Was this an
that's like
oversight?
a lot of people mention that part. Like that is the hang up.
Yeah.
I walk by that unit every day, like when we walk in the mornings. And it was probably my favorite autonomous unit. And I looked up my pictures right now. So that unit that they were showing, it's 156 horsepower. It's got a 350 liter diesel engine and 85 liters per minute for a hydraulic pump. Like it's a nice little machine. But everyone would bring up what happens if something breaks. You hit a rock, you hit a stump, whatever it is, and there's nobody walking out there. There will still need to be some visual oversight for sure.
Yeah.
And one thing I thought was interesting at this show is you really start seeing with all the AI that's starting to catch on and everything, where it's almost like they're moving from actual physical sensors to vision. So,
Yeah.
you'd be looking at your implement and seeing if there's something wrong, if it's leaving a streak in the field or something, if it's plugged. Well, now it seems like more and more the thinking will be, instead of putting sensors everywhere on the machine, we'll just put cameras that look at it and can identify if something's going on that's not normal.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is really where the industry is going, and that's also what we were seeing with autonomy. I mean, autonomy was another big thing at this show, I'd say, but it was more grounded than previously. They were showing equipment that was, for the most part, more plausible to actually be used on the farm. And it's not like people were all pretending, hey, there's that machine, but it never actually ran. It's an empty box, and we're telling you it's going to be electric. We have no idea how we're going to do it. It was more realistic this time. Whatever was shown actually ran in the field for the most part.
So are we going to see that, like, because there was a lot of spray drones and just drones everywhere?
Yeah.
And there, a lot of the claims and the hype, it was just pie in the sky, kind of like, I don't buy it. So maybe in 2 years, when I go back, maybe it'll be a little more grounded in reality and say, like, you know what, we can't go spray 100 acres with a drone, and be the equivalent of a acre sprayer.
I think we're seeing, some real world examples of seeding by drone, of getting crop on by drone, but water droplets with active ingredient is a totally different ball game than a seed. So I can definitely see where, there's a lot of great ideas out there. But we also are, I think we're a long way off from spraying by drone with any amount of precision and being allowed to be honest. Jason notes, I liked when the Kloss guys were showing that this particular machine was paired with an operator in another tractor in the field. So the buddy system, Dan, is that smart?
Yeah. Like, you work together. You and your little droid.
Exactly. You and your little, away you go, hand in hand. And when when it goes veering off, you can be like, hey, somebody grab there you go. Okay, we've got a couple minutes left. Everyone who's in the comments, thank you so much. If you've got any questions from what you saw or what you've seen from social, or if you were there, I really appreciate other people who were there. Jay, let's maybe start with Nick's. We'll just maybe cycle through. We can skip over the ones we've talked about already. But if we do that, Jason Vogt also asked, which we can talk about, we're going through here, were there still more pull type versus self-propelled sprayers that you saw or out that way? Equal?
Yeah.
In my mind, I was amazed at pull types.
Okay. Yep. Nick, now this was the discussion at the 2019 show. Remember they launched a combine? Sean, remind me. It was a combine without a steering wheel. So what's going on here?
Well, basically that was a class concept cab where basically it was actually designed by university students, but it was shown on class booth just what the future of a cab would look like, which I thought was interesting, where you keep your hands on the armrests, you've got joysticks, and you don't ever move again. You just stay there and move your fingers. I guess kids today, they're all playing video games, so that's
uncomfortable.
The future.
Did they look uncomfortable, Dan?
Oh yeah. Yeah, when we went by, it's like you sit in that thing for 12 hours and you can't really move. Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and screens everywhere, that type of stuff. But it's just interesting to see concepts. Most of them will probably never make it anywhere. One thing that did evolve, you were mentioning the combine with the joystick steering. You went to the Fendt booth. They did have an aftermarket add-on joystick for tractors that I did get to try with Farming Simulator. I'm terrible at video games, by the way, so I dumped my entire bucket next to the container. But it was actually very intuitive to use. So I'd be curious if we're going to see more and more of this.
All right. Okay. Next, Jay.
This one, when we're talking about the electrification, that was on the John Deere kiosk, where John Deere they have that electric CVT transmission that they put on the 8R series tractors, and they've shown this before. They won a medal, I think it was a silver medal in 2019, but this they brought it back, and I think we're going to start seeing more around this. We're going to start either this is a driven axle and a trailer. Which I personally think implement propulsion is one thing we'll see more in the future, using that dead weight on equipment to help you gain traction, maybe use lighter equipment as a result. So there's something there, but when we're talking electric, we're not just talking batteries in a tractor. We're talking about converting that power and using it elsewhere instead of mechanical drive lines or hydraulics, which I think is interesting for the future.
Dan, did you see some of that as well? That the discussion of the powered implement? Yeah.
This thing right here, sorry, got me real jazzed. So this is Precision Planting's kind of like soil test lab in a box. And man, like, so each of those little orange tubes will hold your soil sample. It's GPS and QR coded. And you just load that thing up and let it run all night, and boof, you've got your soil test done. That thing, like, I stood there and was just looking at that for a long time.
It was impressive seeing the guy. I spoke to a guy from Precision Planting. He was from Calgary, and I think he mentioned how many patents AGCO got on this. That was a massive undertaking. They've been working on it for like 7 years, and just designing every aspect of soil testing without human interaction. It was really mind-boggling to see it. It wasn't working, but the process was kind of happening. That was really impressive.
Okay,
and that was
that's definitely one to watch.
The first time they were showing. They've announced it, but that was the first time they were actually showing it to people at an event.
Yeah.
So,
wow. Okay. Wait, we got a couple more, I think, and then we'll go to Dan's.
Nexat obviously attracted crowds. The only thing I have to say about this is tires are way too small for the weight of that machine. Even if you're doing controlled traffic, doesn't matter. You're going to sink to China with this.
But that thing was monstrously huge. Like the YouTube videos we see and stuff that don't put a scale to it. Like, that thing is amazing.
There's nothing that will do it justice. You have to see it in real to realize how big
it is. Yeah, for those of you in Manitoba, there will be one in the Winnipeg area in 2024. So
go see it.
Go see it. Put it on your calendar. Go check this thing out. Nick would like it to have bigger tires. We do have a video on this one too. But yes, I think this is one that even when you see, like their provided videos of it, it's hard to see the scale of it unless you're actually like seeing it. So definitely,
And on that thing, those are VF 710s, weren't they, Nick?
Yeah.
Like, they were
I think they were the tallest 710s that exist. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, nice rubber for anything else but that.
And it's just funny that you basically have probably the largest piece of equipment on a farm in the world. The largest self-propelled piece of equipment come from probably one of the strictest country in terms of machine dimensions. Getting it on the road and everything. It hails from Europe. It should have been designed and invented in North America when you think about it. But
okay. All right. We've got a couple more minutes. What's next? Are we going to? Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Okay. So this one really quickly, I thought was there's a focus on alternative energies, but instead of like previous events where everybody's talking electric, it's starting what makes more sense for me. Smaller tractors may go electric for some applications, for vegetables, vineyards, things like that. But there's going to be a range of solutions depending on the size of the machine and the application. So hydrogen, I don't really believe in it, to be honest. That Fendt tractor in the bottom corner, that looked kind of clumsy. Methane power obviously is quite practical in Europe because of all the biogas. And then
Mhm.
one thing that was very low profile but kind of neat was the John Deere ethanol engine concept, where they're actually working on a ethanol powered engine, probably going to start working in Brazil first because of the amount of ethanol they produce there. But they're really looking at that as an alternative to diesel powered or biodiesel. So that was neat to see. I had
Mhm.
good discussion with an engineer from the engine plant in France. So that's the nice part. You meet engineers from who worked on projects. So,
Yeah, it's nice.
and,
Um,
and I guess the
oh yeah.
last one, just to the small clip you showed, there's really they're narrowing down the options when it comes to autonomy. You have two trends right now. You no longer have that tiny microwave sized robot that Fendt had. I mean, they were showing it, but it's probably going to go something bigger. So there's
Mhm.
either uh, implement manufacturers trying to make their own tractors, or the tractor manufacturers trying to take what they already have and convert it to autonomy, which I thought were the two big trends in that segment. Whether it gets mainstream, I mean, regulations are a big thing that are right now they're preventing autonomy in Europe in many cases. So
Mhm.
whether that actually happens like everybody thinks it's going to happen, I don't know.
I do like that you got a lot of tracks in here on this last one. All right.
And I didn't do that on purpose.
I feel like you might have. Okay, Dan, we'll go to yours. There is a question here. Jason asked, so Jason was there. What did Nick and Dan think of the systems and components section?
So two things.
Dan?
Jason made two comments there. The systems and components section was crazy. Like, we stumbled upon it and had no idea it existed. So for those who don't know, it is where you could just go build your own tractor or combine or train
Oh.
locomotive. It's just like, do you need a powertrain? Well, there's 13 vendors who sell powertrains to Deere and Case and whoever else. Do you need a gearbox? Well, here's a bajillion of them.
Mhm.
It was awesome. It was fun. I know, Nick, you played the game too, where you try to
Yeah.
say, like, okay, I recognize that piece. Where did I see it? And you try to place it, like, oh, I saw it on my Deere. That's the hydraulic motor for my Deere or a sprayer,
Mhm.
or just that kind of weird. It was that those were really cool. And then you find some little booth, and they sell every single LED light you could ever imagine, and they paid the booth fees to promote these things. But Jason made another comment about the expert stage presentations in the agri-food startups. We went to a few of those, and like, that's where you hear like some of like the real concept car kind of stuff, like just
Yeah. Sort of the
young
way out
20
there stuff.
somethings living a dream, and like, this is what we're going to try to do, or just, it was cool. Like, that stuff was really neat, and
Mhm.
I think I would focus on more of that the next time I go.
Yeah.
Which it's already in the works, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So
So this sprayer, here's,
yeah.
they're kind of ahead of us. Like, this is like an accordion folded up 3-point hitch sprayer. I had never seen such a thing. I never knew such a thing existed. And you watch videos of these things unfold, and like, they're 90-foot booms on a 12-foot wide folded
Yeah.
frame. Just
It's a bit bizarre.
bonkers. And then they'll carry saddle tanks for the water and a front tank, and away they go. And that was just something I'd never thought of. But obviously they did.
Mhm. Well, if it's got to fit in 3 meters. All right.
Yeah, yeah. And then this thing is an Italian outfit, and on the front of that is so this kind of goes. This is their tillage thing in Europe. So that front of that thing is, when you got the tines go this way in the ground, and then you got a full-on rotor tiller, and then you have a corn planter attached to it. And
Okay.
this thing supposedly makes the perfect seed bed, and it is just pure raw rage against the soil to get that corn plant in, and it just boggled my mind. And they think that is what's required to grow a corn crop.
Right.
Yeah.
Oof. And they were showing, like, there's a
Oof.
live video on it, and you watch the video up close, and there's seed laying on top of the ground. All that power until
All that, and it still doesn't have
so
depth control.
I use this, like, I showed my friends. I'm like, we have nothing to be envious of. And like, when you talk about no-tilling cereals and soybeans to these guys, it just blows their minds. Or that I
That's
can go
possible.
no-tilling alfalfa fields. It was
Yeah.
amazing.
Okay.
This. So we all seen the European high-speed disc. There was probably, we stopped counting after 40 different manufacturers. Like they're all the same to me, just painted different colors. I think it's a ridiculous tool. Some guys love them around here, but man, and each guy will say mine's the best. That one right beside you in the booth next over, even though it's gray, that's what it gets worse. I was like, I can't find the nuance or the difference between that thing. It's crazy. Yeah.
In the tillage hall, you see all the trends happen. If you start going to that show every 2 years, you realize, well, high speed discs were everywhere. Now that everybody has one, they're showing models that work shallower. They're showing models that work deeper. They're just trying to keep selling iron.
Yeah.
But it's just revisiting what they've already done in different shape.
Hey.
Yeah.
And if people like to buy it,
with the Mac on.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Gorgeous machine.
Yeah. The gold highlights are very clear there. Oh yes, and the Canadian.
And then this thing. So this Canada has a huge presence. Like that floor space rivaled Horsch, which Horsch is huge at this show. But like we saw some of our greatest friends from Thunderstruck Ag were there, and just it was awesome. And the amount of people climbing all over this board and oohing and awing over it was so fun to watch, and just it was cool.
That is pretty cool.
It's actually surprising that there is not more, because I think there was a STEP program in Saskatchewan organizing this, but I'm surprised that there is not more of this from other provinces as well, especially Ontario or Quebec, where there's a lot of manufacturers, Manitoba as well, where they could get smaller manufacturers to go there, because that's just great exposure. And I mean, Saskatchewan was probably the one international kiosk that was probably the best one and the biggest one of all the, I guess, government kiosks there. There's other countries as well. I mean, the U.S. one was a little bit ridiculous, to be honest. It was, tiny 10 by 10 spaces hidden in a corner, and
they look like little jail cells.
Yeah. Whereas this was like right in the middle, attracting people. People had to go through it to visit hall number 11, I think.
I will say, I mean, it is a good point of, should more provinces, like more manufacturers be there under sort of the Canada banner. But Saskatchewan, I've said it once, I'll say it again. If they could weld a cure for cancer, Saskatchewan would have done it by now, because there is just so much amazing just innovation and building it. And Saskatchewan just does it. They do have programs that support it, which is really important, and get it out to the world stage. And certainly we know that a lot of, made in Saskatchewan, designed in Saskatchewan equipment makes it out to Eastern Europe and into, Kazakhstan and places like that, where they have similar field size, similar conditions. It just works. Jason Vogt wants to know, was Dagelman there?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. There you go.
And then what Jason C says there about like the forestry stuff, like there was stuff in that show that like I had no frame of reference to, like these monster sugar beet pullers and potato diggers, like huge, crazy looking things. And then you go walk through the mulching section, it's like, holy crap!
Yeah. If you want to watch a video,
building dedicated to manure management, and it was just because it's
kind of a big deal. Yeah, but I would say on the forestry stuff, if you start, like, you watch a couple of those videos, and oh my gosh, the amount of, like, they just take things down and then and then it's gone, and then it's just it's wild. So yeah, you want to talk about horsepower? There you go. Okay, go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say one thing really quickly about like the mulchers, for example, or even biogas and everything, green energy in Europe. It's just crazy how they basically try to harvest every type of crop material they can find. They're cutting trees and chipping them. They're harvesting crop residue. I even saw a tiny baler for vineyards where basically after they're done pruning, all the prunings on the ground, they just bale them and burn them. It's they will collect any sort of biomass they can put their hands on.
Interesting.
They must have organic matter to burn if they're tilling like crazy and burning all the residue.
Right. I don't know. We'll have to look into that one. Okay. Thank you both so much for sharing your experience and your insight into what you saw. And yes, this is an every 2-year show. So in a couple of years, we'll go again
It's well worth
and we'll
going.
do it. What's that, Dan?
It's well worth going. Like we took a week off in the
Right.
middle of corn
Yeah.
harvest or start of. No
Yeah.
regrets. No
Yeah.
regrets at all.
Well, Warren did mention that given how the rest of harvest has gone, he probably could have gone.
He could have done
And
too.
yeah, it would have he wouldn't have lost any harvest time. So there you go. Well worth
And,
it. So go ahead, Nick.
and I'd say there were a lot more Canadian and American farmers this time than in previous times I've been there.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've
Interesting.
noticed there were a lot of farmers from Alberta. I could tell that. I saw a bunch of Martin
Interesting.
Deerline hats, and but all over the country, I know big manufacturers. New Holland took customers. John Deere took customers as well. So if you want to go talk to your dealer, you might, or somebody that sells you something,
I'll take
they,
you.
they might invite you.
Yeah. And you might get the sneak peek into
Yeah.
the new combine in the next 2 years. All right, Nick, Dan, thank you so much for joining me on the Agronomist. This has been a lot of fun. We will see, I
Cindy.
guess, what ends up here in Canada in the next while. But both, I think, I get the sense we should be pretty proud of the things that we do on the compaction front, on our soil management front, on our sprayer front. But let's wait and see what some of these cool things end up making their way here. So thank you both so much. Thank you, of course, for our team having gone to Agritechnica. Thank you to Corteva Agriscience and Optimum Gly, a new canola trait from Corteva Agriscience that supported us going there. And thank you to tonight's show sponsors, to ADAMA Canada and to Enlist E3 and the Real Ag Machinery Update, but also the Sharp Edge, because the video didn't load. So, hey, sign up for our machinery update. Goes out on Saturdays. And next week, it will be our wrap-up show for the year. Get your questions in early. If you've got a particular topic or agronomic challenge from this year that you want us to dig into, just let me know ahead of time, and we'll get that on the docket. And as always, if you collect those CU credits, head on over to realagriculture.com/agronomist tomorrow. Let us know. And until next week, 8 p.m. Eastern, cheers, everybody.